The sky was soft and pale when Ravi stepped onto the quiet beach. He had been visiting this place since childhood, and it always felt peaceful. The sea moved in a slow rhythm, brushing against the sand in a friendly way. The breeze was cool, and the faint smell of salt filled the air. Ravi liked walking here early in the morning because the world felt calm, and the sound of the waves helped him think clearly. Ravi worked at a small repair shop in town, and he carried a lot of responsibility even though he was still young. When life felt heavy, this beach helped him breathe easier. On this particular morning, he felt the same need for calm. He walked close to the water, watching the soft foam curl around his feet. For a long time, everything seemed ordinary. Then, something unusual interrupted the peace. Ravi noticed a thin line running across the sand near a row of large rocks. At first, he thought it might be seaweed, but the color was different. It was tougher, darker, and had a straight shape that did not match anything natural. He stepped closer and crouched down. When he brushed away the sand with his hand, he saw it clearly. It was a cable. It was not the kind of cable used for fishing or boats. It looked like it belonged to a machine. It was thick enough to catch attention, but not too large to move. The strange part was that the cable went deep into the sand, as if it had been buried on purpose. Ravi felt curiosity rising inside him. He looked around carefully. The beach was still empty. There were no fishermen, no children playing, and no tourists walking along the shore. Only the sound of the ocean and the rustle of wind. He tugged the cable gently. It did not move much. It seemed attached to something under the sand. Ravi followed its path across the beach. The cable continued for a long stretch before disappearing under an old wooden plank. Lying near the base of a short cliff, Ravi lifted the plank. The sand below was uneven, as if someone had dug there before. He moved some sand with his fingers and found more of the cable thicker in this section. It looked old, but still strong. This was no accident. Someone had placed it here many years ago. Maybe longer than he could imagine. A small feeling of worry mixed with his curiosity. Why would anyone hide a cable beneath a quiet beach? What could be at the other end? He stood up and looked at the waves rolling in. Nothing around him gave any clue. The sea was gentle and the sky was light blue. Birds flew across the water, searching for food. Everything looked harmless. Yet the cable felt like a secret left behind for a reason. He tried to think clearly. Maybe it connected to an old boat anchor buried under the sand. Maybe it was part of an old research project someone forgot. But none of those thoughts convinced him. The cable seemed too intentional, too purposeful. Ravi looked toward the path leading back to town. He considered leaving and pretending he had never found anything. But he knew himself well. He would not be able to forget it. The image of the cable would bother him all day, and he would wonder every hour what it led to. He decided he would come back later with tools. For now, he pushed some sand back over the cable so no one else would notice it. As he covered it, he felt the rough texture under his fingers, reminding him that the mystery was still waiting. Ravi continued his walk, but his thoughts stayed with the cable. He kept imagining what might be connected to it. A hidden box, an old device, a long-forgotten project left under the beach. None of the ideas felt right. The uncertainty made him even more curious. When he reached the far end of the beach, sat on a flat rock, and looked at the horizon. The morning sun rose higher, turning the water bright. Everything looked normal, yet the quiet beauty of the place did not erase the uneasy feeling growing inside him. Ravi remembered hearing stories from older fishermen when he was younger. They often spoke of strange things found along the coast. Some told stories of unusual stones, old tools, and bits of metal washed up from nowhere. He had always thought those stories were exaggerated or just meant for entertainment. Now he wondered if some of those tales had truth in them. He stayed on the rock for a long time. Part of him felt excited about the discovery, while another part felt a silent warning in the back of his mind. The beach had always been simple, quiet, and friendly. Finding something hidden under it made him feel like he had stepped into someone else's secret. When the sun was fully up and people began to appear at the far edge of the beach, Ravi stood and brushed the sand from his clothes. He did not want anyone to know about the cable yet. He felt protective over the discovery, as if it belonged to him now. He walked back home with a firm decision. He would return in the afternoon when the tide was lower. He would bring a small shovel and a pair of gloves. He did not plan to dig too deep or too far. He only wanted to understand what the cable was connected to. He wanted to know if it was safe or if it was something that should be reported to someone responsible. On his way home, he kept imagining different possibilities. Some seemed simple, some seemed strange, but none made complete sense. Every step he took made him feel more connected to the mystery. It was as if the cable had reached out to him, pulling him into a path he never expected. When he reached his small house, he washed his face and tried to relax. He made tea and sat near the window. He watched people walking along the road, talking, laughing, and living their ordinary lives. None of them knew about the mystery hidden under the sand. The thought made him feel both special and uneasy. He wondered if he should tell someone. His friend Imran lived nearby, and they often shared unusual discoveries. But this time felt different. This felt bigger. He could not explain why, but he felt that telling someone too soon might complicate everything. For now, he decided to keep it to himself. Ravi spent the next few hours working at his repair shop. He fixed small devices for customers, answered simple questions, and tried to stay focused. But his mind kept drifting to the beach. Every time he held a tool, he imagined using it to uncover the cable. Every time he heard the shop door open, he wondered if someone had already found the spot. When the afternoon came, the weather grew warmer. The tide had lowered, just as he expected. He closed the shop earlier than usual and walked quickly back to the beach with a small bag of tools. The air smelled fresh, and the sound of waves felt louder than in the morning. When he reached the place where he had found the cable, he checked the area. No one was nearby. The sand still looked untouched. Ravi uncovered the cable again, feeling the same mix of curiosity and caution. He lifted the shovel and began digging carefully around the buried section. The sand moved easily, revealing more of the cable. It ran deeper and thicker than he expected. It looked old, but not damaged. As he dug, he noticed that the cable turned sharply toward the cliffs. That meant it was not random. It had a direction. Ravi followed the cable's path with slow steps. It led toward a narrow opening in the cliff wall, an area he rarely visited. The opening was small and partly covered by tall grass. It looked like a natural gap, not made by human hands. But the cable disappeared into the darkness inside the gap. Ravi felt a cold wave of surprise. This was no ordinary discovery. The cable was connected to something hidden inside the cliff. He stood still for a long moment, staring at the shadowy entrance. His heartbeat grew louder. He knew he had reached the beginning of something far larger than he expected. Whatever waited inside that cliff had been hidden for a long time, and now he had found it. Ravi stood at the narrow opening in the cliff with a racing heart. The air around the entrance was cooler than the rest of the beach, and a faint sound echoed from inside. It was not loud, more like a steady hum that blended with the natural sounds of the sea. The cable he had uncovered disappeared straight into the darkness, and this alone was enough to keep his eyes fixed on the shadowed passage. He took a few steps back and looked around the beach to see if anyone was watching. The area was empty. A few fishermen worked far away near the water, but they were focused on their boats and nets. No one seemed to notice him, or the hidden entrance. That gave him a strange mix of relief and nervousness. The secret was still his to uncover, but it also meant he was alone with whatever waited inside. Ravi did not enter yet. Instead, he knelt beside the cable and touched it again. It felt cold and rough, as if it had been lying there for many years. Small grains of sand clung to it, and the surface showed signs of age. The cable was thick, stronger than ordinary wires used in homes or shops. It reminded him of cables used in heavy equipment or old industrial machines. He wondered who could have placed it here. There were no factories near the beach. The town had always been simple, with small shops, fishing areas, and old houses that had stood for decades. Nothing about the place suggested any secret project or hidden structure inside a cliff. The thought of such a possibility made Ravi feel like he had stepped into a different world. He took a deep breath and looked at the dark opening again. The narrow entrance looked natural, as if the rock had cracked open long ago, but something about it did not feel completely natural. The ground inside looked strangely smooth, almost like it had been walked on many times before. The hum inside the passage grew clearer as he paid attention. It sounded steady, like something running, something that should not exist inside a hollow cliff. His chest tightened slightly with worry, but his curiosity pushed him forward. He thought of turning back, telling himself he could explore it later with someone else. But another thought quickly followed. If he left the passage now, someone else could find it, or the tide could rise and wash away the signs. He might lose the chance to understand the mystery forever. Ravi pulled a small flashlight from his tool bag. It was old, but still worked well enough. He tested it, saw the beam of light, then stepped into the narrow opening. The air changed immediately. It felt colder, but also cleaner, as if the space had been sealed from the outside world for many years. The passage was tight at first. He had to turn sideways to move through the gap. The walls were rough stone, cool to the touch. After a few steps, the space widened slightly. The floor had a light layer of sand, but beneath it he felt solid ground, almost like concrete or carved rock. He pointed the flashlight down and his guess proved correct. The floor had straight lines, not the random texture of natural stone. This entrance was not fully natural. Someone had shaped it long ago. The hum became clearer the deeper he went. It was steady and low, like a machine operating far away. The sound seemed to run through the walls, making the air vibrate faintly. Ravi felt goosebumps rise along his arms. Machines in a cliff did not make sense, yet the sound was unmistakable. He continued until he reached a wider space where the passage opened into a small chamber. The ceiling rose higher here, and the walls were smoother. Dust covered most of the surfaces, but the room did not feel abandoned. It felt waiting. In the center of the chamber lay a cluster of old wooden crates. Some were broken. Some were intact. All were covered with a thick layer of dust. The cable he followed ran along the wall and disappeared through a second passage on the far side. Before following it, Ravi approached the crates. He opened the first crate carefully. Inside, there were small metal parts. They looked like pieces of old equipment, but he could not tell what kind. Some were round, some flat, and some shaped like small plates with holes. They looked unused but aged. The second crate held papers. Old papers faded and brittle. He lifted one gently. The writing was smudged and hard to read. Some words looked technical, like measurements and dates. But something else caught his eye. In the corner of the page was a small symbol drawn in ink. It looked like a simple square with a line crossing through it. He did not recognize it. He put the papers back carefully. Touching them made him nervous, as if he were disturbing something from a different time. He moved to the next crate and opened it. This one held tools. Rusty hammers, a wrench, and a few long rods. They looked like they had been used to carve or break stone. The handles were worn and old. Ravi felt a chill. If people had worked here, why was the place abandoned? Why had no one spoken about it? Why was the entrance hidden? Stepped back from the crates and turned to the second passage, where the cable continued. This passage looked different from the first. It was wider and smoother. The walls had faint marks that looked like tool lines. He pointed his flashlight toward the end of the passage. But the light could not reach far enough to show what lay ahead. He hesitated for a moment. Going deeper meant stepping farther away from the world he knew. But turning back meant leaving the biggest question unanswered. Who had built this place, and why he tightened his grip on the flashlight and walked ahead? The deeper he moved, the stronger the hum became. It was no longer faint. It vibrated through the ground beneath his feet. The temperature changed again, growing slightly warmer. The passage curved gently, and soon the narrow walls opened into another chamber. Larger than the first, this chamber was different. It looked organized. The walls were lined with shelves carved directly into the stone. Some shelves were empty, while others held metal boxes. The cable ran along the floor and connected to a strange device near the far wall. The device was shaped like a small column with a smooth surface. It stood upright and hummed quietly. Ravi stared at it with wide eyes. He stepped closer slowly. The device was not dusty like the crates in the first chamber. The surface looked clean. It felt alive, as if it had been working for years without anyone touching it. He stretched his hand forward, but stopped before touching the device. He did not know what it was or what it could do. Instead, he examined the shelves. He opened one of the metal boxes and found small round discs inside. They were cool to the touch and had tiny grooves carved into them. They reminded him of old storage devices, but he could not be sure. Another box held rolled-up papers. He opened one carefully. It showed a simple diagram of the cliff with lines drawn beneath it. There were markings that looked like entrances and tunnels. One line was thicker and marked with the same symbol he had seen earlier. A square crossed by a straight line. Ravi felt a deep pull of curiosity. This place was far more complex than he had imagined. Someone had built an entire structure inside the cliff. Someone had stored tools, diagrams, and metal pieces here. Someone had placed a working device in the chamber. But for what reason? He looked at the device again. The hum coming from it felt steady and deep. It gave the impression of a machine performing a task without pause. But what task? Could it be dangerous? Could it be harmless? Could it be something forgotten by the world? He stepped around it and followed the cable to where it connected to the back of the device. The connection looked secure and tight. The cable continued beyond the device and disappeared into a small hole in the wall. Ravi realized something important. The cable did not start at the beach. The beach was only where he discovered it. The cable went deeper into the cliff, far beyond what he had explored. He felt both excited and uneasy. This discovery was far bigger than he expected. There were more chambers, more tunnels, more secrets hidden beneath the cliff. If he followed the cable farther, he would uncover even more. But deeper tunnels could be risky. Going inside alone could be dangerous in a natural way. Not because of anything harmful, but because the tunnels. It might be old and unstable. Ravi sat down on a flat stone and tried to calm his thoughts. He thought about leaving for the day and planning a safer approach. He had a friend named Imran who was trustworthy. Maybe he could bring him along tomorrow. 2 people would be safer than 1. But another voice inside him said that someone had hidden this place very carefully. If he brought another person, the secret would no longer feel like his discovery. And what if someone else tried to take control of it? What if someone tried to shut it down or hide it? Hagun Ravi closed his eyes for a moment. He reminded himself he was here only because he wanted to see what the cable led to. And now he had found the beginning of something much larger. He turned his flashlight toward the passage leading even deeper into the cliff. The cable disappeared into the darkness. He stood up. He was not ready to stop. He had to see where the cable finally ended. Ravi stood at the edge of the third passage, his flashlight beams stretching into the long stretch of darkness ahead. The cable continued along the floor, half buried in dust. The hum from the strange device behind him still echoed through the chamber, but now it felt distant. The new passage carried its own silence, silence heavy enough to make Ravi pause before stepping forward. He tightened the strap of his small tool bag, took a slow breath, and walked ahead. The floor felt different in this section. Instead of rough stone, it felt smoother, almost polished. He pointed the flashlight at the ground and saw faint marks that looked like lines carved in a pattern. The lines were straight, evenly spaced, and ran in the same direction as the cable. The passage walls were higher here, almost twice his height. The air felt warmer, and the soft hum from deeper inside grew clearer with every step. It was still gentle, but now he could tell it had a rhythm. It rose and fell slowly, like waves moving across a quiet lake. Ravi kept walking, careful with each step. The passage seemed to be longer than the others. He checked his phone for time, though he had no signal inside the cliff. He wanted to know how long he had been walking, but the lack of signal reminded him again that he was completely disconnected from the outside world. After a while, his flashlight revealed a series of shallow grooves in the walls. They looked like tool marks, but they formed shapes that he could not understand. Circles, straight lines, and curves, all arranged in rows. They reminded him of symbols or diagrams, but none matched anything familiar. He walked closer to one and touched the stone surface. It felt cold and smooth, as if someone had carved the marks with great care. The symbols did not look random. They looked planned, like instructions or records left by the builders of this place. Ravi wondered again who those builders were. Were they from the town in the past? Perhaps from a research group who had kept their work secret, but the tools he saw in the earlier chamber looked older than any modern project. The style of the carvings looked older than his own grandparents. Everything felt ancient, yet the working device from the chamber suggested something advanced. Ravi continued deeper. The cable guided him like a line that refused to let him turn back. The passage sloped downward slightly. With each minute, the air grew warm and carried a light smell of metal. The hum grew stronger. It no longer sounded like one machine. It felt like several devices working together in a steady harmony. Eventually, the passage leveled out and opened into the largest chamber he had seen so far. Ravi froze at the entrance. His breath caught in his throat. The chamber was vast. The ceiling rose high above him, lost in shadows even with the flashlight pointed upward. The walls curved smoothly, almost like the inside of a giant shell. Lines carved into the walls formed circular patterns, many of them glowing faintly as if illuminated from within the stone. The light was soft and steady, not bright or harsh, just enough to reveal the structure without hurting the eyes. This chamber felt alive. On the floor, arranged in a long circle, were 6 tall pillars. Each pillar stood with perfect spacing. They were shaped like slim columns, smooth and polished. Faint patterns glowed on their surfaces, similar to the carvings on the walls. The cable Ravi had followed connected to the base of one pillar, then seemed to branch out from within the stone itself toward the other. Pillars in the center of the circle stood a round platform. It was raised slightly, large enough for a person to stand on. The surface was smooth and clean, with no dust. It looked as if someone had polished it recently, though Ravi knew that was impossible. No one had entered this place for years, maybe even longer. Ravi stepped inside carefully. His footsteps echoed softly in the chamber, reminding him how silent and deep the room was. He walked around the nearest pillar and ran his fingers along its surface. The stone felt warm, not hot, but warm enough to be unusual. The glowing patterns pulsed very faintly, making him feel as if the pillar was breathing. He stepped back, unsure what he had touched. Nothing reacted, but touching the pillar made him feel more aware of the soft hum surrounding him. It was not loud, but it filled the room evenly, as if carried through every surface. Ravi walked toward the center platform. He felt a nervous excitement building inside him. This was no simple hidden room or abandoned project. This felt like a part of something far larger. Something old. Something important, but important in what way he approached the platform and examined its edges. The carvings here were slightly deeper, arranged in circular lines around the platform. He followed the carvings with his eyes and realized they connected to the glowing lines on the pillars. The entire design looked connected, almost like a system. The deeper he studied it, the more certain he became. This chamber was built with purpose. Every stone, every line, every pillar had a function. He walked around the platform again and stopped when he noticed something on the far wall. At first it looked like a crack, but as he moved closer, he realized it was a thin door carved into the stone. The outline was barely visible, almost blending with the wall patterns, but the shape was clear enough once he was close. A hidden door. Ravi stepped closer and touched the edge of the stone. The door did not move. He pressed a bit harder. Still nothing. It felt solid, as if locked into the wall. He looked around for a handle or a symbol that could activate it, but found nothing clear. His eyes drifted back to the central platform. He wondered if stepping onto it could unlock the door. The design looked like it was meant to be activated by weight or motion, but the idea made him nervous. If the platform triggered something, was it safe? Was it meant for people at all? Ravi stood at the edge of the platform, thinking deeply. He had come all this way following the cable. His path had led him to the largest chamber inside the cliff. The door on the wall was the next clue, but he could not open it by force. He needed to understand how the chamber worked. He studied the pillars again. Each pillar had a slightly different pattern carved into it. Some had circles, some had waves, some had a combination of lines. He walked from one pillar to the next, tracing the patterns with his eyes, trying to notice any differences. The symbols looked deliberate, but he could not read them like language. He stopped at the pillar connected to the cable. Unlike the others, the glowing patterns here were slightly brighter. They pulsed at a steady rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Ravi placed his hand on it again. This time he felt a soft vibration under the surface. He pulled back quickly, surprised. The pillar reacted to his touch. The pulsing grew slightly stronger for a moment, then returned to its normal rhythm. Nothing dangerous happened, but the reaction was clear. Ravi wondered if the entire chamber reacted to people. Maybe the platform was meant to sense someone standing on it. Maybe the pillars needed to be activated in a certain order. Many possibilities ran through his mind. He knew he needed to take a risk if he wanted to move forward. He walked back to the central platform, placed his foot on its edge, and stepped up slowly. The moment his full weight rested on the platform, the floor beneath him vibrated. He froze, tense and ready to jump off. The vibration was gentle. The glowing lines along the platform brightened softly. The hum in the chamber shifted in tone, rising slightly. Then the hidden door on the far wall released a faint sound, a soft click. Ravi turned toward it with wide eyes. The door, which had been silent and unmoving, now showed a very small gap along its side. It had unlocked. Ravi stepped off the platform and approached the door slowly. He placed his fingers on the edge and pulled. The stone moved with surprising ease. It slid open, revealing a narrow hallway behind it. A warm air drifted out, carrying the same metallic scent he had smelled earlier. The hallway was darker than the chamber behind him. It looked untouched for a long time. Ravi stood at the doorway with mixed feelings. Relief for opening it. Fear for what might be inside. Curiosity pushing him forward. And a sense that he was now deeper in the mystery than he had ever planned. He took a breath. He stepped inside. He did not know that this next hallway would reveal something that the world outside had not seen in many years. Something placed deep underground for reasons lost in time. Something he was never meant to find. The narrow hallway stretched ahead of Ravi like a long ribbon of darkness. His flashlight beam touched the floor, the walls, and the low ceiling, revealing a smooth surface shaped with careful detail. The air was warm, calm, heavy, with the faint metallic scent that had guided him. Deeper into the cliff, the hum from the chamber behind him faded as he walked forward. Each step echoed softly, as if the hallway did not want to disturb the silence. The darkness ahead looked endless, but Ravi kept moving, guided by the cable that ran beside him. The cable was like a lifeline, connecting everything he had seen so far, leading him toward whatever truth waited at its end. After several minutes, the hallway changed. The walls curved to form a gentle bend, and the ceiling rose a little higher. A pale glow appeared ahead, soft and steady. Ravi felt his heartbeat quicken. Light inside a place that had been sealed for years was never a simple thing. Light meant power. Power meant activity. And activity meant purpose. He moved closer and stepped into a wide room shaped like an oval. Unlike the earlier chambers, this one did not hold strange pillars or complex carvings. It looked more like a place meant for people. The walls were smooth and light in color. The floor had an even surface without dust. The room looked clean, untouched, and preserved, as if waiting patiently for someone to enter. Ravi took slow steps inside. There were no tools, no crates, no broken pieces of metal. Only silence. At the far end stood a large rectangular structure built into the wall. It resembled a giant panel with a smooth surface. The glow in the room came from thin lines across that panel. The lines formed a simple pattern, like an outline of a shape he could not identify. The cable he had followed connected directly to the bottom of this panel. The connection point looked old but strong. The hum from the cable was clearer here, vibrating gently through the room. Ravi stepped closer and studied the panel. He brushed his hand against its surface. It felt warm and smooth like polished stone. Suddenly, the faint glow in the panel brightened. Ravi stepped back in surprise, but the light remained soft and steady. The shapes on the panel shifted slightly, rearranging themselves into a new pattern. It was as if the panel recognized movement in the room and came alive. Ravi waited nervously. The light formed several symbols. Some were simple lines and squares. Others looked like images. One symbol looked like the cliff from above. Another looked like a pattern of tunnels. Another resembled the center platform he had stepped on earlier. His eyes widened as he understood something. This panel was showing information about the entire structure inside the cliff. It was like a map, a record of places he had explored and places he had not reached yet. He leaned closer. The glowing symbols moved slowly, drifting across the surface like gentle waves. Each symbol seemed to represent a different part of the underground system. Some symbols were dim and hard to see. Others glowed brighter. The brightest symbol was the one shaped like a circle with lines extending from it. It reminded him of the chamber with the 6 pillars. That chamber seemed to be the heart of the system. Everything connected through it. Ravi looked around to see if anything else in the room reacted. There was nothing else. Only the panel continued to glow. He touched the edge of the panel again. The symbols shifted once more, and a new arrangement appeared. Now the panel showed simple images that looked like objects. A tool, a metal disc, a simple stone symbol, a square with a line through it. The last symbol made his chest tighten. He had seen it earlier on the papers in the crates. A square with a line through it. The same symbol carved deeper into the central platform. The same symbol he saw by the strange device in the second chamber. Ravi realized this symbol must have been important to whoever built this place. It was everywhere, repeated like a signature. He touched the symbol lightly. The panel responded again. This time the light expanded, covering the entire surface with a soft glow. Slowly, shapes appeared and formed a new image. A large circle, lines running outward. Smaller circles around it. It looked like a diagram of a power system. The central circle, likely the chamber with the pillars, was the source. The smaller circles were the connected sections. The cable he followed appeared like a glowing line connecting all parts. Ravi stepped back and took a slow breath. Whoever built this place had created something complex, something powerful, something hidden. But why hide it? The panels, the chambers, the passages, the symbols all pointed to a purpose. He walked across the room to a smaller section on the side. The wall here was not smooth. It had 3 narrow shelves carved into it. On the middle shelf, he saw a small object covered in dust. He picked it up carefully. It was a rectangular block with a smooth surface, similar to the metal boxes he had seen earlier. It was small enough to fit in his palm. At first he thought it was just a simple piece of equipment. But when he turned it over, he saw the familiar symbol on the surface. The same square with a line through it. He wiped the dust gently and felt a small indentation at the side of the block. It looked like it could be pushed. After a moment of hesitation, he pressed it lightly. The block vibrated once and made a faint sound, like a soft chime. Ravi froze, worried that he had triggered something dangerous. But nothing alarming happened. The panel on the far wall reacted again. The glowing lines shifted. The center of the panel brightened. The block in his hand began to glow faintly. Ravi stared at it with wide eyes. He did not know what it was, but something told him it was important. Maybe it was a key. Maybe it was a memory device. Maybe it was meant to be used with the main chamber. He placed the block back on the shelf, unsure if he should take it. He wanted to study the room more. He walked around slowly, examining each corner. Everything seemed deliberate. The clean floor, the smooth walls, the glowing panel, the object on the shelf. Nothing felt random. He returned to the center of the room and looked at the panel again. The shapes on it moved one last time, forming a single simple pattern. A circle with a thicker line beneath it, like a doorway. The meaning was unclear, but the symbol reminded him of the narrow door he had opened by stepping on the platform earlier. Maybe this room was showing him how to reach something further inside, something deeper. He looked at the panel and then at the hallway he had walked through. Behind him was the chamber with the pillars. Beyond the pillars was the entrance, but ahead of him lay the next part of the underground structure. Ravi stood still, thinking carefully. Should he pick the block and take it with him? It might be important. It might help him unlock other chambers. It might explain the secrets hidden in this place. He picked up the block again and held it firmly. It felt light in his hand. Safe. Somehow it felt right to bring it with him. Then he walked to the far wall. He noticed a second doorway carved into the stone. He had not seen it earlier because the panel light had distracted him, but now he saw it clearly. A narrow opening, similar to the first hidden door. But this one was darker and deeper. The chamber behind him hummed softly, as if waiting for his next step. The glow on the panel dimmed slowly. As if the room was preparing to sleep again, Ravi tightened his grip on the glowing block, took a breath, and stepped through the new doorway. What lay ahead was the deepest part of the cliff. It's untouched by time, untouched by people, and filled with secrets that the world had forgotten. He walked forward with steady steps. He was ready to see what waited in the darkness ahead. Ravi woke up before sunrise the next morning. His mind had been restless all night, filled with thoughts about the strange cable, the hidden structure, the old notes, and the signals that kept rising from the cave. He felt that everything was moving toward one last turning point. The beach was quiet, but he knew that the secret beneath it was no longer sleeping. Something was waiting for him. He had no choice but to face it with a clear mind. He packed a flask of water, a torch, a notebook, and the copied maps he had drawn from the documents inside the cave. He studied them again while the sky turned faint orange. The maps showed 2 final tunnels that he had not explored. One tunnel led further downward into a sealed chamber marked with a simple circle. The second tunnel ended in a strange symbol that looked like waves rising upward. Ravi did not know what either of them meant, but he understood that both were part of the same story that had been hidden for too long. He walked to the beach with steady steps. The air was cool and salty. The sand felt damp under his feet. The cable he had uncovered earlier remained in the same place, quietly waiting for him. Ravi brushed the sand away and followed the line back to the entrance of the cave. The path had become familiar to him, but it still carried a sense of mystery. He took a deep breath and walked inside. The tunnel was silent except for the small echo of his footsteps. The torchlight spread across the stone walls. Ravi moved through the old rooms and the stone shelves where he had found the ancient notes. He kept going until he reached the point where the 2 unexplored tunnels began. He stood before them for a moment, unsure which one to choose first. Both felt important, and both felt final. Ravi decided to start with the tunnel on the left, the one that led downward. The floor sloped gently. The air grew cooler with each step. The torchlight flickered against the uneven stone surface. It felt as if he was entering a place that had not been touched for many lifetimes. A faint vibration traveled through the ground beneath him, steady and quiet. The tunnel opened into a circular chamber. The center of the room held a large stone slab. The cable he had seen outside reached this chamber and connected to a metal fixture set into the stone. The fixture was shaped like a ring with small markings around it. Ravi recognized some of the markings from the notes he had studied earlier. They were symbols used to record directions or important points. Whoever built this chamber had planned everything with care. Ravi examined the stone slab. It was smooth and solid, carved with patterns that looked like waves, spirals, and paths leading outward. He traced the lines with his finger. They felt warm, as if the stone carried a memory of energy inside it. A question came to his mind. Why was this chamber hidden so deep below the beach? What purpose did it serve, and why was the cable connected to ETH? Sat down on the edge of the slab and opened his notebook. He compared the markings on the slab with the ones from the old notes. The notes explained that the stone acted like a control surface for something even deeper below. It maintained balance between natural forces, but it could also release those forces if the control broke? Ravi felt a chill run through him. The chamber was not simply a hiding place. It was part of a system that protected the land above. He stood up and walked around the slab. On the far side of the room, he noticed a panel carved into the wall. It carried the same wave-like symbol that appeared on his map. The panel had a narrow opening where something could be placed. Ravi checked his bag and realized that the circular stone tile he found earlier fit perfectly into such an opening. He approached the panel and carefully inserted the tile. The ground beneath him shook slightly. The markings on the panel glowed faintly, but not with a bright or unnatural light. It was a soft, natural, shimmer-like reflected sunlight. The slab in the center of the room vibrated, and then a thin stone section on its surface slid open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down. Ravi hesitated only for a moment. He knew this was the last part of the mystery. He walked toward the staircase and slowly descended. The steps were tight and the walls were smooth. The air grew warmer now. After a minute of steady descent, he stepped into a small chamber lit by a soft, natural reflection from crystals. Embedded in the walls, at the far end of the chamber, he found a large stone door covered in symbols. The cable ended here, attached to a carved stone wheel at the base of the door. Ravi approached the wheel and placed both hands on its surface. It was old but sturdy. He pushed, and the wheel slowly turned. The stone door lifted upward with a deep, steady sound. Behind it was a pool of water, still and clear. Ravi knelt beside the pool. The water reflected the crystals above, creating gentle patterns that moved across the walls. In the center of the pool, a flat stone platform rested just below the water's surface. It carried more carvings, but these carvings were simple. They showed paths, rivers, mountains, and coastlines. Ravi understood. This place was not a danger. It was a foundation built to monitor and protect the environment above. The cable was not a threat. It was a connection to this underground system, bringing signals from the shifting land and sea. The cave was an ancient watchtower hidden below the beach. The people who built it had wanted to make sure the land remained safe. But time had buried their purpose until everyone forgot it. Ravi felt a steady calm fill him. He realized that the unusual symbols or tools were only misunderstood because no one had been left to explain them. The notes he found earlier mentioned that the builders believed the natural world had its own rhythm. The structures they built simply supported that rhythm. He stayed beside the pool for a long time, taking notes in his notebook. He wanted to record everything clearly. This discovery was important, but it was not something to be exposed wildly. It needed careful explanation. It needed respect. When he finally stood up, he looked around the chamber one last time. He felt grateful that he had been the one to uncover it. It was a responsibility, but also a gift. He walked back up the staircase and returned to the main chamber above. He removed the stone tile from the wall panel, and the slab closed smoothly again. The chamber returned to complete stillness. Ravi traveled back through the tunnels and stepped out into the sunlight. The beach looked normal. The waves moved gently as always. The sky was open and bright. But for Ravi, everything had changed. He looked back at the cliffs with a quiet sense of purpose. He now understood the secret hidden beneath the sand. He covered the cable again with care. He did not want anyone to disturb the system without understanding it. The ancient builders had trusted nature, and now Ravi felt that trust resting on his shoulders. He walked along the shore, listening to the calm sound of the sea. He knew he would return again, not out of fear or worry, but out of a sense of belonging to something greater. Ravi felt peaceful as he headed home. The hidden cable, the secret passages, the strange symbols, the underground system had all led him to a new understanding of the land he lived on. It was a story woven with time and patience. Waiting for someone with curiosity and courage to uncover it, Ravi had become part of that story now, and he carried it forward with respect, knowing that some secrets were not meant to bring fear, but to remind people of the quiet power that rests beneath the world's surface.